So members, good afternoon. Welcome to our open session. We have apologies today from Michael Copeland and from Brenda Hale, and Alex Atwood, who was with us in the closed session, has had to leave us. I think that covers everybody at this stage. The Finance Minister, as we know, members, made a statement to the Assembly on Monday with regard to the draft budget for 15-16. We've been advised £5 million has been allocated to the Historical Institutional Abuse inquiry, which suggests that it now has its own budget line rather than being dependent on monitoring. And there's £3 million to the Victims and Survivors Service. But overall, there's a reduction of 0.6 in resource DEL being proposed for OFMDFM. A quote from the budget document: ministers will seek to publish more detailed breakdowns of proposed expenditure on their departmental websites. This should be accompanied by detailed information on the measures required to enable the department to live within their budget allocation and include details of implications for frontline services. It would be my impression, members, that ministers are now going round their statutory committees to discuss the implications for their various departments. Are members content that we ask for a briefing from ministers on the implications for the OFMDFM budget for 15-16? Okay, thank you very much. In line with previous convention, the Committee for Finance and Personnel is going to coordinate a report on the draft budget on behalf of Assembly committees. However, the timescale is likely to be very, very tight on that. So to help this timeline, are members content that we seek the views of OFMDFM's sponsored bodies, the arm's length bodies, on the department spending proposals as soon as they're published on the website? In other words, as soon as the department publishes on the OFMDFM website further detail that impinges on the budgets of the arm's length bodies, we then write to the arm's length bodies and say, what do you think? Because I don't think we have time to start doing evidence sessions. Okay, thank you. It's also proposed that there's some training on budget scrutiny to all committees to assist with our investigations into the 15-16 draft budget, and that's expected to be rolled out within the next couple of weeks. There was some discussion previously, members, about extending the programme for government for another year. Could I suggest that we write to the department to ask what plans are in place with regard to a possible extension of the programme for government to cover 2015-16 financial year? Thank you. Members, we were provided meeting attendance records for 2013-14 in September. Members were invited to contact the committee office if there were any issues. No responses have been received, so the attendance figures will be made available on our website from this Friday, the 7th. Next to page 45, an invitation from Inclusion Quality Mark. They're making a presentation to 9 local primary schools who have achieved the National Quality Award. That's the Long Gallery on Monday the 17th, 2 p.m. You can see a list of schools with the invitation. Would you respond, please, directly to the Inclusion Quality Mark if you wish to attend. Then page 47, an invitation from Collaboration NI. This is an event looking at the challenges facing the voluntary and community sector. It's at Lough Neagh Visitor Centre, Thursday the 27th of this month, 9:30. Again, would members please respond directly if they wish to go. And finally, in this section at 49, there's notification of a Committee of the Regions event in Brussels. That's on Tuesday the 9th of December at 2:30 p.m, and that's just for noting. Page 52 is a copy of the committee's current invitations. In the absence of comment, we move on to the draft minutes of our meeting of the 22nd of October, starting at page 54, and I ask if members are content to agree. Great. Thank you. In terms of matters arising, at page 60 is the list of outstanding correspondence. We wrote to ministers on the 2nd of October requesting the Executive consider supporting the Belfast Islamic Centre proposals for new premises. We haven't heard from ministers to date, and actually representatives from the Belfast Islamic Centre are scheduled to come before the committee next week. So if members are content, I would propose to write again to the department just pointing out that the representatives are here next Wednesday, and if they can give us something to report back, that would be obviously useful all round. Okay. Correspondence summary sheet, members, is at page 63 of your pack. I'm going to ask the clerk to highlight items that require decision. You can, of course, bring up any other bit of correspondence in this section of the meeting. Kathy.
Thanks, Chair. The first item I'd like to refer members to is at page 65. It's response from OFMDFM to queries that were raised by Patsy McGlone on behalf of the APG and Construction regarding the investment strategy portal. And it's just to see if members are content to forward that response on to Patsy.
Great.
And the second one again is the House of Lords European Committee, free movement of citizens and businesses in the EU at page 241 of the pack. And that's from a response from DFP in respect of a query that the committee had received from the House of Lords regarding costs to provide certificates for registered life events. And it's just to check that members are content to forward that on to the House of Lords European Committee.
Great.
And unless members have any issues on any of the other items of correspondence, that's it.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Members, just as we move into the substantive item today, the briefing on childcare, could I just note that my party is involved in a bilateral, the talks at 4 o'clock down at Stormont House, so I would probably need to leave in just under 60 minutes. And if we haven't finished, obviously we'll ask the Deputy Chair to step in. So it's the Bright Start Childcare Strategy. In September, we were told that an update on the process for developing a final childcare strategy was in place. This was followed by a request to brief the committee on the development of the draft consultation document and to discuss measures to address the issues faced by parents with regard to childcare costs. So, page 246 of your packs, members, contains the clerk's brief, and then the briefing paper from the department begins at page 248, and clearly after this week's activity in the House in terms of the childcare payments bill, I'm sure one of the issues we'll want to raise is what work will be undertaken in terms of families who may be disadvantaged by the switch in scheme. So we welcome to the department Martin Tyrrell and Henry Johnson. And Henry, I think we invite you to make opening remarks of up to 5 minutes.
Okay, and I'll be quick, so I'll hand on to Martin about halfway through. My name is Henry Johnson, as most of you know, and I've taken over responsibility for the Bright Start Childcare Strategy in OFMDFM from Margaret Rose McNaughton. And I believe officials last formally briefed the committee on the Bright Start strategy back in March. However, more recently in July and then September, the strategy was discussed when officials briefed the committee on the legislative consent motion relating to the childcare payments bill, which, as many of you know because you were present yesterday, went through yesterday. And I'm sure, as the Chair said, that's one of the things you'll ask us about today. Committee members will know that we launched the first phase of the Bright Start strategy in September last year, and that this included a list of 15 key first actions intended to address the main childcare priorities that we identified during research and in public consultation. We will shortly update you on how these are progressing. We'll also provide an update on work in progressing the full Bright Start strategy. And as the committee will be aware, ministers wish to launch the full version of the strategy next year. And I'd like to hand over to Martin now, who will give a brief summary on where things are regarding the key first actions.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just say a little bit about the paper that we sent you and just go through some of the main items in that paper. The paper covers 3 separate developments. The first phase of the Bright Start strategy, where we are with the first phase, where we are in terms of developing the full version of the Bright Start strategy, and also looking at the issue of affordability, which came up yesterday. The first phase, as Henry said, was launched in September last year and comprised 15 key first actions to address the main priorities and childcare needs that were identified during consultation and research in 2012-2013. Responsibility for those key first actions was assigned to various departments. The Key First Actions 1, 2 and 5 were assigned to OFMDFM, and I'm going to focus on those because those are the most ambitious of the Key First Actions. Those are the actions dealing with school-age childcare, with breakfast clubs, after-school clubs. That was an area where parents, when we consulted parents, they identified that as an area of under-provision where they wanted to see more childcare services made available. Key First Actions 1, 2 and 5 aim to sustain or create between 5,000 and 7,000 school-age childcare places up to 2017. And to make that happen, we have developed a grant scheme which was launched in March of this year. The grant scheme is being delivered for us by the childcare partnerships, which are part of the Health and Social Care Board. And the first call for projects ended on the 16th of May this year. That call drew 77 applications, of which 50 met the criteria, and those 50 are worth £1.9 million over a 3-year period. They will sustain 1,165 places, or they aim to sustain 1,165 places and create 326 new places. A second call closed at the end of September, and that has drawn 42 applications, and the assessment of those applications begins next week. We'll have a third call in 2015, and prior to that we'll undertake preparatory work to develop high-quality projects and to help people who have good project ideas to develop those ideas prior to the formal call itself. Other Key First Actions are progressing. I would draw attention in particular to the Positive Outcomes for Children with a Disability initiative, which has been taken forward by the Department of Health and Social Services, and also the work that DHSSPS are doing in terms of making childcare information more readily available to parents through an enhanced information system, Family Support NI, and through providing that information in the form of a social media app. And the work that Dell is doing with regard to workforce development. Looking at the development of the full final version of the strategy, we're taking that forward on a co-design basis. So we're working very closely with stakeholders to develop a consultation document. That work began before the summer and has included one-to-one meetings with the main childcare stakeholders, and then following those up with workshops to which the main childcare stakeholders were invited. We had a workshop at the start of October, and we have a workshop coming up again at the end of this month. And all of the information that we've gathered through those workshops, that will all be taken into account as we develop the final version of a consultation document. We're hoping to launch consultation after the November workshop with a view to meeting the target of launching the full final Bright Start strategy in 2015. Turning then to affordability of childcare, the key issues that parents identified during the consultation process that were inhibiting them from using childcare services were availability of childcare and affordability of childcare. We're trying to address availability through, for example, our grant scheme, but that is also trying to address this issue of affordability because the childcare places that we aim to provide through the grant scheme will be low-cost childcare places. In addition to that, we're promoting the financial assistance currently available to parents to help them meet the cost of childcare. And we look forward to the introduction of tax-free childcare, which we think will be an improvement on its predecessor on employer-supported childcare. We think that there will be more beneficiaries here under the new scheme, under tax-free childcare, and we think that there will be a greater amount of money delivered overall and also at the individual level through the new scheme. The reasons we believe this is because the new scheme is offering per child assistance. So the assistance is more assistance per child, basically. It's the more children in a family who are in registered childcare, the more assistance that family will receive. It's not reliant on employers to be participant in the scheme. The scheme is independent of employers. There's a direct link, parents link directly into the scheme. They don't rely on their employers. And self-employed people can now access the scheme, which was not the case with its predecessor. We appreciate that employer-supported childcare is better for some people, and we welcome the fact that employer-supported childcare will remain open for the people who are currently with that scheme. That's essentially what's in the paper.
Okay, Martin and Henry, thank you very much indeed. I'm not going to dwell on the change in the schemes just a moment, because obviously this strategy is much broader than that. I am going to refer to some page numbers, but they're page numbers of the packs. Your pages aren't numbered, but you have the paragraphs numbered, so okay. I'll do both. So members, I'm starting at page 249 in your pack, and as you've said, these most ambitious first actions 1, 2 and 5. You're saying in the first call 77 applications have now been assessed, all 77, 50 have met the criteria. Any common reason for the failure of the other 27?
Cost would have been one. I don't think it was the dominant reason why projects failed. Sometimes there were administrative errors in the form, for example, that people were asking for more capital, or they were asking for capital expenditure that wasn't eligible. Issues like that. There's no single dominant reason why applications failed. All applicants who failed were given feedback on why they failed. All are encouraged to resubmit for the second call or for subsequent calls, and anybody who felt that their application was dealt with unfairly has the right of appeal.
How often did you have to make a judgment about whether or not the applicant met your test of whether they were a social enterprise?
I wasn't personally involved in the actual assessment process, but I observed on some of the panels. I don't think that came up that regularly, maybe once or twice.
You'll be aware that in previous discussions we had some concern about how easily defined your view of a social enterprise is. Can you update us on what you currently believe it to be?
Well, we were very clear in the guidance that was issued to applicants that a social enterprise is an enterprise that invests its surplus. In the case of a school-aged childcare setting, a social enterprise setting is one that invests its full surplus back into that particular setting.
So that's a new definition, because previously you had a business with primarily social objectives whose surpluses are principally reinvested.
Yeah, we wanted to clarify that, because principally, when we checked with social economy people in Invest Northern Ireland, their view was that principally means that the setting or the business can invest in other social enterprises. For example, if you had a consortium of social enterprises and one of their settings, one of their facilities was making a surplus, they could distribute that surplus across a range of settings. We wanted to focus any surplus back into the setting that generated it.
So principally remains in the definition?
Yes, it does.
I think it's just a clarification. It was about not necessarily profit making, but not profit taking. We were just refining that in terms of, I know there are some facilities would look as there's a childcare element as one of the elements that might generate funds for other social purposes within that setting.
Computer courses could be funded, but yeah, okay. And primarily social objectives, again, primarily is not objective, but have you had any difficulty applying that test?
Not without that further clarification.
Okay, now again on this first call, you have got the objective, of course, is to sustain or create these places, and you're saying in the first call 326 new childcare places were created and 1,165 were sustained. So that's a ratio of about 20% of the total being created, 80% being sustained. Is that what we should expect going forward?
With the first call, it's what we expect, but not going forward. We didn't expect to receive any new settings applying under the first call, because the first call closing date was just 6 weeks after the launch of the grant scheme. What we were conscious of in the first call, there were 40 school-aged childcare settings that had been funded by an OFMDFM scheme that was due to close on the 30th of September this year. We wanted to give all of those 40 settings an opportunity to get an application in before their OFMDFM funding timed out on the 30th of September. So that was one of the reasons for having so tight a call right at the start. We picked up all 40 of the OFMDFM funded in the 77 applications, and also an additional number of projects as well, existing school-age childcare projects that were not currently funded by OFMDFM. So those results aren't surprising for the first call, but certainly for the third call in particular, we would be expecting to see new settings, brand new settings, not settings just that are not known to us or not previously known to us, but brand new settings coming.
But surely from what you're saying, Martin, these results are surprising in that 20% are for new places.
I suppose it was a pleasant surprise then, yes, that we got some new...
Your primary objective in call one was to protect the 40 organisations whose funding stream was going to close.
And any other projects whose funding was precarious.
When I say protect, I don't mean...
Yeah.
I mean to make sure
I don't think all 40 were actually.
They weren't all successful.
Not all 40 were.
Not all 40 were successful.
But you were keen to make sure that they weren't going down a cul-de-sac that where the lights went out at the end of September. They had an opportunity for an alternative. Okay, gotcha. Turning the page, members, at paragraph 4, it's maybe just the language, but this reads, OFMDFM is planning to open a third call in 2015. In advance of this, the childcare partnerships will be undertaking preparatory work to inform and animate the sector. Why wouldn't you want to inform and animate the sector for calls 1 and 2?
Well, we did that, and we got mainly existing. We got mainly existing on the second call as well from an initial analysis of the second call. So what we seem not to be getting at the minute, except as expressions of interest, are brand new providers coming forward with new childcare settings. And that's what we want to encourage in 2015, because this stands or falls on how many new providers we can encourage to set up. So the promotional work will be continued, but it will be much more focused now on prospective new providers. Previously, we'd been promoting the scheme, we'd been encouraging people to apply. Now we will be encouraging new people to apply and also mentoring people who've got good ideas.
In terms of your own lead objectives, you've one call processed. The second, you've got 42 applications. You're processing those. You're about to go out to the third call. So you seem to be hitting the ground. When we look at those that belong to DARD and DRD, DARD is currently considering options. Rural transport services that will support this initiative are being considered by DRD. Dell, the language has been taking forward work, seeking to do things and considering initiatives. So would it be fair to say that you're much further down the road than your partner departments?
I don't think so. In the case of Dell, a lot of the contribution of Dell will come after we've had our third call, because if we're hoping to fund new settings, those new settings will need to be staffed at the appropriate level. They will need qualified staff. They will need qualified managers. We don't want to displace existing provision, by, even in the sense of taking staff away from existing providers. So Dell will be honing what they are doing in terms of building up the workforce skills to focus on emerging projects that are coming through on the third call. So I wouldn't say that Dell are in any way underperforming on this. They're making a contribution to the key first actions.
Okay. The final action is 15, and on page 251, paragraph 10, you talk about how you're managing the strategy, and that's through a childcare strategy management forum, which meets every 1 to 2 months. Who populates that forum?
That's all of the departments that have a policy interest in childcare. So all of the departments with a key first action,
Yep.
DHSSPS, OFMDFM, DHSSPS, DSD, who don't have a key first action but have an interest in childcare, DRD, DARD, Dell, and childcare partnerships are also represented to give a stakeholder voice.
It would be interesting to see the minutes, the action plans, whether you use RAG indicators. Would it be possible for the committee to have sight of those?
Could certainly follow that up.
Yeah. I think there's a meeting, my first meeting.
On Friday?
It's on Friday.
Okay. Have to ask, What are the implications for this strategy given the latest budgetary constraints?
In terms of OFMDFM and our commitment, money was made available, £12 million was made available, and we intend in the fullness of time to deliver that £12 million. We allocated £1 million in June monitoring to DHSS to allow them to take forward both the grants and the administration in relation to that first wave. And we would hope, we fully intend to support it at least at that level going forward. I think other departments will need to take a look at what they'll be able to contribute based on their budget positions.
Could you just define fullness of time for me, Henry?
We have a minimum commitment of £1 million. We would want to invest more than that. The Childcare's initial intentions was to invest significantly more than that, but we will be reliant really on monitoring rounds to secure additional funds over and above that.
Sorry, I'm maybe not understanding this right. When we get to the end of this mandate, would you be confident the 12 million will have been spent?
No.
How much could you say with confidence you think realistically can be spent? We'll
need to see how much we spend next year. This year we'll only spent the commitments that have total about 2.7, something like that.
Yeah.
And a further 1 million this year with 3.7, and whatever we spend next year. So I would be very surprised if we achieve 12. But the intention is to achieve 10, perhaps going into the next mandate.
10. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the candour. Jimmy Spratt.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of points that the Chair raised with you in relation to the 77 applications, 55 accepted, and then you said there was a right of appeal. Can you explain that right of appeal to us, and how many groups, we assume 22 groups, how many of them appealed, and how many of those appeals were successful?
From memory, there were 2 appeals, and appeals can be on the grounds that the decision was unreasonable or maladministration. I think one of those 2. I think on both cases the appeals were on the grounds that the decision was unreasonable. I don't know the outcome of those appeals as yet.
I think it's important that we know that, and sort of how I assume that each group is made aware that there's an appeal mechanism at the start. I have to ask you, how independent is that appeals mechanism?
The appeal...
Or how's it done? Can you explain to us how it's done and who sits on it? And I would be expecting you to tell me that it was done from outside the department in terms of another department or something doing it. Is that right?
The department has no involvement in the selection process. The selection process is carried out by the strategic funding panels that are organised by the Childcare Partnerships. So those are local. Those are based at Health and Social Care Board Trust area, and they comprise social partners relevant to the childcare sector.
So what sort of a person would sit on a panel to judge a...
The actual panel that takes the decision would be groups such as Playboard, Early Years.
How many people would be on a panel of appeal?
Around about 8-9 people on a panel. And then there would be somebody who'd carried out the basic analysis of the application, who would do a presentation of the application and what the aspects of the application were.
It would be helpful, Chair, if we had some indication as to the panels that said who was on those panels and how they were formulated and who...
Can you take that as a request? You don't need that in writing.
How they were done.
The appeal is then heard by people not involved in the original decision, I believe by staff from the Childcare Partnerships who were not involved in the original decision.
We'll clarify that too.
Okay,
as well as
if that could be done,
composition.
that would be helpful, just to see what this mechanism is. Just going back to yesterday's debate, in terms of childcare voucher scheme, and I mean, I think generally accepted, the department have accepted, everybody has accepted that some people will be disadvantaged. In terms of the disadvantage, there was some talk yesterday, and I think it was only a play with words as opposed to where it was suggested there was going to be a scoping exercise. But in actual fact, that exercise is something more like a, I think the department said that they would try to estimate the numbers. Now, I suspect, tell me whether this is right or wrong, in terms of people who are getting the scheme, given that it's a scheme that comes under tax regulations, really, doesn't it? At the end of the day, even the voucher scheme is paid for from that point of view by Treasury. I suspect, given the confidentiality, similar to medical records, that there's an issue with that information being divulged, that there's an issue between HMRC and the individual, you or I, as taxpayers at the end of the day. It has to be made clear that, so the department, would the department get numbers at the end of the day, or do the department, is it only if somebody comes forward and says, well, I've been seriously disadvantaged, and is there a mechanism that could be put in place to allow somebody, given the commitment of the junior minister yesterday, to say that in terms of the rest of the childcare strategy, that the department would look at some mechanism to be able to assist those that may be severely disadvantaged?
I think,
what way can we do that in terms of getting that information? What way can we make folks who are in schemes aware that there is a possibility that they could get some additional help?
I think the first stage in our estimate will be to try and establish how many people are likely to be disadvantaged under the new scheme and get some idea of the amount by which they're disadvantaged.
But if you don't have access to the names or to the individuals, given the rules and regulations under HMRC regulations, which are not dissimilar to medical regulations, how would you garner that information?
I think where we were trying, the primary but not the exclusive organisation in Northern Ireland is Employers for Childcare, and they have been helpful in providing with some information, but they don't have, ready access to some of the information. So our understanding, based on the information they provided us with, is that there are currently 1,000 employers who are participating in the scheme, and there are 11,000 families who are making use of that, and that the recruitment rate is roughly 1,000 a year. HMRC, using UK-wide figures, have stated that they reckon some 20% of families would be worse off, which is where we used the 200 families for. What we now need to do is to find out what information sources we can access, bearing in mind that some of the information we would like to have known in terms of, say, the ages of the children, so to see whether they're being disadvantaged because they were over 12. And again, we had some statistics in terms of childcare provision, that only less than 7% of childcare providers makes provision for children over 11, in essence. So we really need to look at to see, are there any publicly available information sources, bearing in mind we will not get people's tax records, which will allow us to come up to a realistic estimate of how people will be disadvantaged. And that's further complicated by, there may be some families who would potentially be disadvantaged but may be able to avail. Say one of the situations is if there's one parent working and the other parent is not working but is in training or in further education, they may be able to avail of childcare provision. So there might be 200 potentially, but slightly less than that might actually be.
So are you saying to us, in terms of the voucher scheme, that the main information comes from the childcare people, and that you will, or the department will, make moves to see how best that information can come back? Because that was one of the commitments
it is, yes,
that has been made in terms of trying to establish, and I think a number of members around the table have raised it, trying to establish how many people are severely or considerably disadvantaged.
Yeah,
I mean, I would accept that there's going to be more people actually advantaged out of the whole new scheme. And I think I said that yesterday in terms of the 116,000 people who are self-employed. But can you tell the committee today that the department is absolutely committed to looking at that and seeing how disadvantaged people can be put into.
Yeah, we're absolutely committed to looking at that, and we'll be looking at a range of information sources. But all I'm saying is, you know, in terms of the information that employers for childcare have readily available, they don't have all of the stuff we would need to do that realistic model. We will engage with them further, and we'll be looking at other potential information sources. Because one of my other concerns would be potentially people who maybe members of, you know, national organisations who maybe signed up with it, but do have a presence in Northern Ireland. We need to be sure that we're actually getting the full size of the cadre who could be disadvantaged, not just, you know, a segment of it.
Yeah, but the info you have, Henry, I think it's interesting. You're saying that employers for childcare are saying at the moment about 1,000 families a year sign up for the current scheme.
Yep.
And of that, around 200 or 20%.
No, HMRC are saying about 20% nationally. So if we apply the 20% figure to
It says 20% here,
Yep.
but that excludes all those who will be able to avail of the new scheme, so that 20% figure, if it is accurate, will shrink.
No. No, what I think is I anticipate the 20% figure will shrink somewhat. I think as Mr. Spratt said, you know,
So there's only one scheme available at the moment, and
There's only one.
HMRC are saying under the new scheme, if you can't apply for the current one, around 20% will be less well off.
yes.
What HMRC or what HMT are saying is that of the people currently availing of employer-supported childcare vouchers, 80% of those people will be better off under the new scheme. So if we have 10,000 people here signed up for employer-supported childcare, we can expect 80% of them to migrate to the new scheme, leaving a core of 2,000. As their children age out of the scheme, that 2,000 will diminish. But employers for childcare say that there are 1,000 people who join the scheme every year. That would be 200 in years to come.
200 people who would have been better off.
Yeah, but as a percentage then, if you take then that there will be more people who will be eligible for the new scheme, so the 1,000 number may go to 1,500.
Yes.
Therefore, that percentage, that number who are disadvantaged as a percentage shrinks.
Yes.
Because you have more people overall.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just what we're saying. Okay, sorry, Jimmy, you?
Well, thanks, Chair.
Yeah, okay. Bronwyn.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Going back to key point 6, rural childcare. You know, do you know what the options are that's currently being considered by DARD? And also as well, DRD are considering rural transport initiatives, and are you able to provide any further information on that?
The original proposal was that, in the key first action, was that that Bright Start would intervene and create 1,000 new childminder places serving the needs of rural communities. And the DRD aspect of that would be to provide transport infrastructure to link those places to, for example, schools, if those were children whose parents were using childminders to look after them in the hours before and after school. That would be a transport system that would bring the children to and from school to the childminders. I believe that the analysis that was carried out by DARD has suggested that there isn't a strong need for new childminder places in rural areas, and that they're looking at other options. For example, childminders are registered for 6 children generally, but the average use is 4. I think the average childminder has 4 children signed up rather than the full 6. Looking at ways in which existing childminders can be encouraged to maximise the number of children that they're caring for. And the transport infrastructure part would stay.
So DARD analysis said that there was no need for a new childminder.
For additional childminder places. That was there.
Okay, what did the consultation say?
The consultation that was carried out on the childcare strategy
Yes.
suggested that there was a strong need for childminding places in rural areas. But there are issues of cost and also the issues of existing provision. And I think as well DARD looked at a previous initiative that was carried out on childminding and the fate of the childminders who had been assisted under that previous initiative, how many of them were still childminding, and I believe 39% of them were no longer childminding.
You know, speaking to people in rural areas, what I'm being told is that they're not really interested in the childminding places. And my understanding is from a question that I asked of the Minister that flexibility will be shown regarding those 1,000 places, that they can be transferred into a social enterprise model, because I think that's where the demand is.
That's exactly. Yeah. There's another option that has been looked at is to have childcare centres that have childminders attached, some of whose staff can function as childminders depending on need, or can be absorbed back into the centre to look after children in the centre. So there is some flexibility there.
Certainly that came up in that the event we had at the beginning of October. There was quite a focus on rural childcare, and one of the things that was coming out quite strongly around the tables was the idea of those centres with, you know, almost satellite childminders, which meant that if the childminder's own children were sick and couldn't take, then you had somewhere where parents could take the children. There'd also be the ability at that centre could then host maybe bigger events where a number of children could come together to do more socially intensive events, which would prepare them maybe a little bit better for moving into a school setting.
I'm also aware of someone in a rural area, because there is a particular need in this area where they had difficulties in getting access to buildings, because we don't have too many, for example, government-owned buildings in rural areas. So there is an issue to do with buildings in rural areas. So if you're looking to set up a childcare facility, the buildings aren't there. And I think that's something that does need to be looked at. If I go into Dungannon town, I can go to the council office and they can give me a database of vacant properties within the town if you were looking to set up a childminding facility. But in rural areas, that access is not there. You know, so that is a particular problem in rural areas. And I think, you know, I'll obviously, you know, I have raised it, you know, with the Minister, but it's something that, you know, should feature in your thinking as well, you know, because we have a coordinating role on this matter. Okay, and that may be a cause of why we're not getting new providers as well.
Yes.
Because the facilities aren't there, the buildings aren't there.
David McAfee.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, you give a list of sort of bodies and stakeholders that are around the table when you're sort of coordinating this project. Maybe I misheard. Is the Department of Education around that table, or are they not?
I think there are educational stakeholders there from, for example, Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education and similar bodies like that, and also perhaps education and library boards. I'd need to check definitively the list of participants in the strategic funding panels.
Okay, so you think the boards might be around the table on that?
Yes, from memory,
yeah.
I'd need to check definitively.
Okay, because the reason I ask, and it's kind of touching a little bit on Bronwyn's issues, because I think it's probably more a rural issue than an urban one, but it's around what role does the department, do you have as officials within the department have around the management of places and funding for places? Because I mean, we do have issues, and I think it's well known that some schools, some primary schools that are perhaps struggling to build their numbers projecting into the future, and obviously it's all about viability, people at desks, children at desks in schools, who are providing childcare, certainly breakfast clubs and childcare facilities, almost at a loss, in the full knowledge that, particularly from preschool age, there will be an inevitability that if they have already formed friendships and bonds within the preschool at a main school building, and inevitably then the choice will be made for the child to be enrolled in that school. And whilst from a parental choice point of view, from a parental convenience point of view, I can see the merit in that, it quite often is then at the disadvantage and cost of other childcare providers, whether it be community-based childcare facilities or even individuals who want to set up a childcare facility. So I suppose, and I'm kind of veering onto a line here where I'm possibly going to sound a little bit more to the left ideologically than I actually am, but how are we going to ensure that either existing larger providers of childcare are not just going to gobble up all of this money, and possibly worse still, how can we ensure that it is not, I suppose, ultimately used as top-up funding for the education system as well, which obviously has its own budget. So how can that be managed? What message can you give to those people who do want to sustain maybe perhaps a small rural childcare facility, who may just look at this and think this is us finished once this comes in?
One of the key selection criteria for any applicant, for anyone applying to the grant scheme, they have to show that they're not duplicating or displacing existing provision. They have to show that there's need. And when we looked at it, when we tried to map this, super output areas in Northern Ireland, there's 890 super output areas. 75% of those have no centre-based school-age childcare provision. So in 75% of our super output areas, there's nothing to displace because there's nothing there already. And it's that 75% in particular that we're targeting. That tends to be rural areas, tends to be disadvantaged areas. So that's an important aspect of the decision-making process, to establish that any applicant isn't simply coming in and duplicating existing provision. And one of the advantages of using the childcare partnerships as managing agent is the local knowledge that they can bring. Each of those funding panels is a local funding panel and can bring its local knowledge to bear on the decision-making process. As for the top-up issue, every project has to show that it's sustainable or is capable of becoming sustainable over a 3-year period. We're not giving people subsidies here, we're giving people assistance to become sustainable, freestanding businesses that we can then step back from. We're trying to create a network of sustainable, low-cost childcare providers. So the sustainability issue should exclude people just looking for top-ups to keep going for a few years.
Through the chair then, how do you balance, kind of arguing against myself here, but how do you balance sustainability against efficiency? Because surely it would be much less expensive for me as a parent to drop my child to a breakfast club in a local school, albeit that it might be 5 miles down the road, and then that's the school that the child is going to, as opposed to taking him or her to a facility half a mile away from my house, but they then have to be transported from that house down to the school, whenever the main school day starts. How do you balance those things up?
Well, on schools, we don't exclude schools from applying. Schools can apply. If schools can meet the criteria, if they can show that they're progressing towards sustainability, and if they can show need, if they have a strong application, they will get funded, and we would encourage that. We want to see 2,000 to 3,000 school-based places. And in fact, schools are pretty key to this, because schools are strategically located throughout Northern Ireland. And if we can get schools to buy into this, that will start to address the problem, accessibility and availability of childcare places. But I would say that they still need to show sustainability. They still need to show non-duplication. They still need to show that they're meeting need. And they still need to show that they're progressing towards sustainability.
And there's obviously two ways that could be done. Either the school is running the facility itself, or the school can maybe make spare buildings, particularly if a shrinking role, available maybe to a community provider or even to a private provider, so that they're co-terminus. It cuts down the anxiety of parents of people travelling distances between the childcare setting and the school setting, perhaps, particularly for breakfast club wraparound. So that's one of the areas we will be looking at. Again, it's really sweating the school estate a wee bit more.
Which I suppose then, just starting my first question, it would be advantageous to have the Department of Education around the table.
Participate in the management forum for the childcare strategy. So I possibly didn't mention them when I mentioned the departments that are around the table. So I correct that now and say that they're also part of our managing forum. Okay. It's sometimes easier to say who's not part of the management forum.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on that point, gentlemen, key first action number 1 is that the new facilities and extended facilities will be rolled out as social enterprises across areas in 25% of highest deprivation. Your first rollout has created or sustained 1,491 places. How many of those are in those 25% highest deprivation areas?
48 of the 50 successful applicants are serving disadvantaged communities, so they are either located in the top 25% most disadvantaged areas, or the majority, it's either 30% or better of the parents using the service are from a disadvantaged area.
So can you give me a number out of the 491?
Of the places that we're creating?
Yes.
No, we can do that number, but of the 1165, do you have the number of?
Oddly not off the top of my head here, but
We'll come back
it would
to
be the majority, because 48 of the 50, it must be the overwhelming majority of those places are serving disadvantaged communities.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so the childcare budget for 2011 to 2015 is £12 million, yeah?
That was the amount that was committed. £12 million was committed.
Okay, and how much of that has been spent to date?
2.7.
2.7.
Okay, okay, so there's a fair amount left. One of the key principles and actions in the Bright Start is informed parental choice. And Action 7 is better access to information on childcare and financial support, with 3 sub-actions. One is to improve the family support website, one is to create an app, and one is a publicity campaign around childcare and financial assistance for childcare. Where is the department in relation to those actions?
None of those actions sit with OFMDFM. Those actions are assigned to DHSSP.
Okay, so where is the executive in relation to those actions then?
The enhancement to the FSNI website is complete. The app was launched recently in the last couple of months, certainly available. On the promotional campaign, that has not yet started. For the promotional campaign for unregistered childcare and the financial assistance. Within the grant scheme, we're promoting the financial assistance that's available. We require all assisted settings to promote to the parents who are using their service the existing financial assistance that's available to them, and that includes advising parents which form of assistance is more appropriate to them, which one they should be applying for.
Only those people who have access to Bright Start?
The people who are being funded, these are the settings that have been grant aided.
Which is
as a condition
drop
of
in the ocean in terms of families out there?
It's 50 assisted projects thus far,
Okay.
moving up
All right.
to enough 291 eventually.
The app, I think, is called Childcare and Family Support, and I tried to find it today and I wasn't able to. Could you check that it is functioning and maybe give us some information in relation to it? Because I think apps are a good idea.
Yep.
if they are working. In terms of the publicity campaign, I know we've touched on the fact that the current UK HMRC financial assistance scheme, the childcare voucher scheme, is likely to be changing in autumn 2015, although my understanding is there might be a bit of slippage in relation to that, so it's going to be late 15 at the earliest before that change happens. Given that there's only £2.7 million of £12 million budget spent, and organisations have been lobbying and proposing detailed publicity campaigns, detailing ideas in terms of how to go about it, television adverts, using bounty packs for new parents, etc., and it's been costed at around £200,000, which is a small percentage of the money that has been failed to be spent in the current budget. And given that the average savings for families who avail of that childcare voucher scheme is around £1,000 per year, why has a publicity campaign not happened?
I'm not aware of why it hasn't happened. I need to follow that up.
We'll need to follow that up and find out.
Okay.
In relation to the existing one, you know, HMRC are meant to be
Promoting that,
promoting that on a UK-wide basis. We'll find out what's happening on the DHSS.
Okay, I mean, that was a thread of the contribution yesterday, that this is a UK government scheme over the EU UK government, but OFMDFM are responsible for children and young people and childcare, so, and have a significant amount of millions of pounds worth of money available to them to try and increase access to funds that are coming out, that aren't even coming out of our block grant. Those childcare voucher savings are coming from the UK budget, and given that there's around 11,000 families availing of it, and estimates around maybe 200,000 families that could be availing of it, I think it's scandalous that a wholesale campaign hasn't happened, given how little of that money has actually been spent. I think there's a real opportunity for OFMDFM to try and activate a wide-ranging publicity campaign as a matter of urgency, to try and increase that childcare voucher scheme uptake between now and late 2015, which would also help ensure that if people were better off being on the childcare voucher scheme setup, that they would have signed up to it and would then have a choice between it and the new childcare payment scheme. So I would like to think that OFMDFM does something about that, whether it's OFMDFM or health. There's a significant amount of money available there to try and action that, and it's not rocket science. You know, it's a publicity campaign that there's been clear suggestions made for it. Maybe you could provide the committee with an update in relation to that. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much. Megan Farron.
Thanks. Probably would have linked in better with your point earlier around the 48 applications from 5 areas. What was used to measure the deprivation? Was it neighbourhood renewal areas, or?
What we used, we went down to super output area, and we used income deprivation affecting children, the proportion of children under the age of 16 in low income households. So the top 25% in terms of disadvantage, it ranges from, I think, 96% in the most disadvantaged super output area down to 37% in the least disadvantaged of the top 25%.
And do you have a geographical spread of the successful applications, or more interestingly, maybe the not successful applications?
We could certainly provide that.
Yes.
And in terms of the projects that did receive funding, was there any of them, probably both in capital and revenue, did any of them receive full funding, or was it all part, or?
The maximum that any setting can receive under the grant scheme is equivalent to 25% of their running costs. That's calculated as their operating costs minus their fee income. The grant scheme will fund the shortfall up to an amount equivalent to 25% of their running costs.
Okay.
Or £70 per child.
Yeah.
And just finally then, I know there was issues in my area, and speaking to people in other constituencies, I know it was the same, and I'm not sure if fault lies with the department or with childcare partnerships, but there were serious delays in terms of letters of offers going out. Some people had gone into September and ended up losing places as a result of not having received a letter of offer on time. So has that been resolved across the board, or?
No.
We're in the process of resolving that. We're disappointed that the letters of offer were not issued in September. That tension.
Okay. Is that the fault of the department or the childcare partnerships, or both?
We're trying to resolve that with DHSS. I think there was some concerns until the budget was known about entered into commitment for future years. When we transferred 1 million to them, but I think they wanted assurances, and we've provided them with assurances that the money would be available, next year and the year after. We're hoping those assurances will be sufficient, and then now issue the letters.
Okay.
Sorry, what was your area? Which trust area do you fall into?
Southern Trust.
Southern Trust.
Two hopefully quickies to finish with, Henry. I'm going back again to the first call. 326 new places created. Are they actually in existence now on the ground?
No.
Right. Timescale?
They won't be created until those letters of offer are issued. But we're anticipating that once those letters are issued, they'll be very quickly provided.
So, timescale to the letter of offer?
We would hope within a week, 2
Right,
weeks.
okay. And finally, I think the document's silent in terms of the important issue of flexibility of opening hours. Is the strategy addressing that? That's something parents look to?
The strategy will be addressing the issue of flexible childcare to meet atypical working hours.
Okay.
Sorry, a point just to finish off on a point you raised in terms of geographic coverage. One of the areas, one of the trust areas isn't that great in terms of applications. Southeastern Trust area.
Okay.
And
Noted.
Noted. And that's one of the areas we'll want to see if we can encourage and find out why that area is falling behind other areas.
Chair, is it
Happy to work with you on that.
Is it possible to get details of the successful projects to date?
Yeah, we've agreed to do that and to map it.
Right. So the details of the successful ones you've agreed to do. You've agreed to provide, at Jimmy's request, details about the appeals process and who does it.
And the panels.
Chris on the advertising, and me with the minutes and action plans of the Childcare Strategy Management Forum. Yeah?
Yep.
You're going to take that away? That
Can I
would be an
just
answer at
quickly-
least.
You mentioned Southeastern Trust now. Is that applications are per or
It was both.
Very few, relatively few applications, relatively few successful applications.
Okay, Martin, Henry, thank you both very much indeed. Members, forward work programme is at page 258. In the absence of comment, I'll ask if there's any other business. In the absence of which, can I say I will be absent next week, so I'll ask the Deputy Chair to conduct the meeting. Be on Wednesday the 12th, 2 p.m. in room 30. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.